Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime Guru. I'm your host, Brock Scales. Today, I will be discussing the disappearance of 22-year-old Ieshia Jackson, who was last seen on Halloween in 2020, getting ready to go to a party in El Dorado, Arkansas. In the following days, Aisha was said to have traveled nearly 350 miles away to Houston, Texas with her aunt. But in reality, the last verifiable sighting of Aisha was on Halloween night. And what happened to her after that is still a mystery. Just a heads up, today's case does touch on the subject of sexual assault, so please watch with care. You guys know that I usually like to give you as much information as I can about the background and other details about the subjects of my videos. But unfortunately, there just wasn't a whole lot of this type of information out there about Ieshia Jackson. What we do know from her brother Jaquez is that Aisha was an extremely down-to-earth girl who absolutely doted on her cats and dogs and really enjoyed dancing. Jaquez told the Steve Wilkos Show that when Aisha danced, the room lit up. So it's no surprise that on Halloween of 2020, Aisha was planning on attending a costume party at a nightclub in Camden, Arkansas. Her mother, Laquita Parker, recalled stopping by that night to drop off some medication for Aisha. And as far as I can tell, there was nothing unusual to report. And Aisha was really excited about going out. And, of course, dancing. But Laquita had no way of knowing that this would be the last time that she would see her daughter. Now, it's important to note that there are a lot of discrepancies in the timeline of Aisha's disappearance. Some sources have her disappearance date listed as October 31st, but some have it listed as late as November 4th. There's also some discrepancy in the events that occurred between those dates. So I'm going to try to be as clear as I can, but if you wind up confused, just know that you are not alone. I am right there with you. Most of the sources report that on November 1st, Aisha's aunt Shaquila had called Laquita to let her know that Aisha was coming along with her and her longtime boyfriend, William Earl Parker Jr., to Houston, Texas. Apparently, Shaquila was in the process of moving back to El Dorado from Houston and had asked Aisha to help her come and clear out her old apartment. Now, even the dates of this little trip has some discrepancies. Shaquila says that they all went down to Houston on November 3rd, and that she and William dropped Aisha back off in El Dorado on the 4th. However, most of the reporting says that after all of Laquita's calls and texts to Aisha went unanswered on the 1st, that she and Jaquez went over to Aisha's place to see if she was okay on November 2nd. Another thing that's important to note is that Aisha had not been staying at her main residence at this time. Apparently, there had been several break-ins at Aisha's place in the previous weeks, causing her to become so fearful that she was staying at a temporary residence. Well, when Laquita arrives at Aisha's temporary home on November 2nd, 2020, she instantly becomes unsettled when she finds that the door is ajar and that several of Aisha's more important items, like her phone and wallet, were still inside. Now, this next part is according to what Jaquez said on the Steve Wilkos Show. He says that not too long after arriving at Aisha's, Shaquila shows up and she is like hysterically crying and even going on Facebook Live, calling for people to come out and help search for Aisha. Jaquez found this to be strange because although they were concerned, there weren't like major alarm bells going off at this point that Aisha was in some sort of trouble. Now, what's weird to me is that all of this is said to have occurred on November 2nd. But Shakila says that she was with Aisha on the 3rd and dropped her off safe and sound on the 4th. Like I said, major discrepancies in this timeline. Very early on, Jaquez says that they were receiving some very ominous reports about what happened to Aisha. All of these rumors started to swirl around that Aisha's remains were in a shallow grave in Strong, Arkansas, which is a town about 20 miles east of El Dorado. So naturally, they go there and they are met with a law enforcement officer. Jaquez said on the Steve Wilkos Show that they were standing nearby some woods, and he swears that he could hear a voice from a distance screaming, "Help me." And apparently the officer heard it as well and even went to investigate. Now, again, this is according to Jaquez, but he says that Shakila was there as well, and she was saying all kinds of things like, "Y'all didn't hear anything, y'all crazy," and even allegedly said, "I know for a fact that she's not here." But ultimately, nothing would be found in Strong. And as far as this voice goes, it's unclear as to whether or not there was actually someone in trouble. At this point, it is very clear that something had happened to Ieshia Jackson, and she is officially reported missing. Her family was especially concerned because Aisha had been diagnosed with sickle cell anemia, which is basically a condition that causes a person's red blood cells to be misshapen, which are known as sickle cells. And since red blood cells carry oxygen throughout the body, the presence of these sickle cells causes a lack of oxygen throughout the patient's body. One of the symptoms of this condition is what's known as a pain crisis, which occurs when the sickle cells cause blood flow to be blocked in a certain area of the body, and it causes pain, which can sometimes be severe and constant. And it seems that this pain was constant for Aisha, as it has been reported that she was hospitalized several times for this condition. So the fact that she was without her medication was extremely worrisome for her loved ones. This investigation would prove to not be easy for detectives. I mean, they were looking at a very vast area where something could have occurred between Houston and El Dorado. And I'm sure that this extremely confusing timeline did not make things easy for detectives either. All of these different stories and dates made a lot of people question whether Aisha had even been in Texas. However, it has been reported that detectives were able to verify that Aisha did in fact travel to Houston. I'm not sure exactly how they verified this. I'm assuming that it could have been through cell phone records, but I'm not sure. It has also not been reported when they verified that Aisha was in Houston, which would obviously clear up a lot of these conflicting dates in the timeline. As the weeks went by, it became graver and graver for Aisha's family, as there seemed to be no answers in her case. That is, until December of 2020, when 2 men would ultimately be arrested in relation to Aisha's case. Now, police have said that they do not believe that these 2 men are associated with each other. And you'll see what I mean when I break it down here in a second. The first man's name is Simanje Dismuke, and he and Aisha had apparently been romantically involved. Now, I did not get the impression that this was like a serious relationship or anything, and it had reportedly just ended right before Aisha's disappearance. And the whole reason that Aisha had been staying at that temporary residence is because she suspected that it was Samanje that was breaking into her home, which is already disturbing behavior and a major red flag. And it has also been said that the police had located Aisha's DNA in the trunk of a vehicle that could be traced back to Samanje. Now, I want to make it clear that the police have not said this themselves, and as far as I can tell, it is just a rumor. So take that with how much ever salt you want. Samanje was ultimately charged with capital murder, kidnapping, and enhanced penalty for engaging in criminal group activity, which I think is just a fancy way of saying committing a crime with another person or persons. The other man, who I will call Steve, did not face the same charges as Samanje. Steve was charged with extortion or theft of property for allegedly going to Aisha's family and telling them that he would provide information on Aisha's whereabouts for the price of $8,000. This is something that I have seen so many times, and every time that I do, it literally boils my blood. This is such a disgusting and cruel thing to do to a family who is already hurting. And the perpetrator never actually has any information and are essentially just being an asshole. And that was the case here. It was determined that Steve did not actually have any information and didn't even know Aisha, or Samanje for that matter. The charges against both Samanje and Steve would be dropped after 60 days per Arkansas law, since the district attorney chose not to file any formal charges. In Samanje's case, I guess the lack of physical evidence and that of a body caused the DA to believe that they did not have enough evidence to prosecute. The charges being dropped was already disappointing enough for Aisha's family, but the fact that these men were even arrested had caused a lot of people in the community to stop paying attention to Aisha's case. In the public's mind, arrests had been made, and that sometimes causes public interest to dissipate. But Ieshia Jackson is still missing. And unfortunately, this is kind of where Aisha's case still stands today. No formal charges were ever brought up again against Samanje Dismuke. But at least for Aisha's family, they believe that a person of interest might be a little closer to home. To Aisha's family, specifically Jaquez, the discrepancies in Shaquilla and William's stories were a little too much for him to not think that they might know a little bit more than they were saying. This obviously caused a lot of tension and a major rift in the family, which unfortunately happens all too often in families with missing loved ones. So, as I've mentioned a few times already, both Jaquez and Shaquilla appeared on the Steve Wilkos Show in November of 2023. Now, if you've never watched Steve Wilkos, it's a lot like Jerry Springer, Montel Williams, and shows like that. What's commonly known as trash TV. So keep in mind that the whole purpose of these shows is to instigate conflict, which really pisses me off that they would use such a serious situation like this young woman's disappearance as content to create conflict between two family members who are already hurting for entertainment purposes. I promise I'm not going to go on like a whole tangent about it, although I probably could make an entire episode about just how unethical it is to do this, just for ratings, essentially. So the show had Jaquez come on first and kind of tell his side of the story. And as I mentioned earlier, he was telling them about how Shaquilla showed up right when Aisha turned up missing and was acting strangely, and the whole thing about her saying that she knew for a fact that Aisha wasn't in the woods. And I'll be the first to admit that if she really did say this, it would be Super sus. Then, of course, they had Shaquilla come out and tell her side of the story. She stayed steadfast that she and her partner, William Earl Parker Jr., had traveled to Houston with Aisha on November 3rd, 2020, and dropped her back off in El Dorado, Arkansas on the 4th. However, she did add something that I found super interesting. She said, quote, "If he, meaning William, doubled back, I can't speak for that," end quote. Meaning that she cannot say for sure that William did not go back to Aisha's and subsequently harm her in some way. She also said, quote, "Due to some stuff that has come out that we can't speak about right now, I wouldn't put it past him," end quote. Now, I did find out about the stuff that she was referring to, and believe me, I will get into that here in a minute. Now, there was a bit of contingency between Jaquez and Shaquilla about whether or not Shaquilla and William had taken a formal polygraph. Jaquez claims that they told him and that Shaquilla had posted on Facebook that they had taken and passed a polygraph. But Shaquilla says that the police told her that there was no need for them to take a polygraph because they weren't persons of interest and they were already looking at somebody else, supposedly Samanje. Well, as they normally do on the Steve Wilkos Show, they had subjected Shaquilla to a polygraph. But I urge you to please take this with a bucket of salt. Because, for starters, polygraphs are already unreliable, and this was administered by a television show for the purpose of entertainment. Shaquilla was asked, "Were you involved in the disappearance of Ieshia Jackson?" in which she answered no, and according to the TV show's polygraph, she answered truthfully. The second question she was asked was, "Do you know for sure who was involved in the disappearance of Ieshia Jackson?" Shaquilla had answered no, and this answer showed deception. Now, I have watched a lot of police interrogations and videos of people taking polygraphs, and I have a problem with the way this question was worded. Because they added, "Do you know for sure who was involved?" I feel like that could create some doubt in someone's mind, and at least in my opinion, it doesn't seem like a question that you could confidently answer yes or no to. For example, if Shaquilla had a person in mind, but she did not know for sure, then I could see where, and again, if this is even a real polygraph, that could show deception. I feel like if they had asked the more cut and dry question, "Do you know who is involved in the disappearance of Ieshia Jackson?" then they might have gotten more accurate results. But of course, I'm sure the producers did that on purpose because they knew a question like that would come back as deceptive, and then conflict between Jaquez and Shaquilla would ensue. Which it did, but keep in mind that that is the purpose of these so-called trash shows. Ultimately, the show really did not bring forward any real answers and probably just created more of a rift between the family. But let's discuss the possibility of Shaquilla and William being involved. Now, this is just my personal opinion, but when I was watching this segment, I personally felt that Shaquilla came off really forthcoming and truthful. She seemed just as pained by Aisha's disappearance as anyone else. And if that was all for show, then she is a really good actress and could have fooled me. I'd be really curious to know what you guys think, so if you want to watch it for yourselves and let me know, the clip is in the episode description. Do I think it's possible that Shaquilla might know more than she's letting on? Absolutely. But I also feel like if she does know something, she might not be saying anything out of fear. Of course, I do not know the whole situation, but she and William are no longer together after 9 years. And with some stuff that has come forward about William, I can see where there might be a component of fear in there for Shaquilla. With that being said, in July of 2023, William Earl Parker Jr. was charged with sexual assault in the second degree and sexual indecency with a child. This case is still moving through the courts and has not been adjudicated. This, of course, does not have a direct link to Aisha's case, but something that Shaquilla said while on the show does give some insight into what might have happened to Aisha. She said that William allegedly admitted to sexually assaulting Aisha. And when you add what she mentioned about William possibly going back to Aisha's after dropping her off, it does paint an eerie picture about what might have taken place. I don't know if the El Dorado police have questioned William about this, but all of this combined does make him a pretty good person of interest in the case. Then, of course, there is the very real possibility of Samanje Dismuke being involved in Aisha's disappearance. I know I say this a lot, but that is because it is all too true. Statistically, when a woman is harmed, it is almost always at the hands of an intimate partner. We don't really know a whole lot about the relationship between Aisha and Samanje, but the fact that she had temporarily relocated to another residence after suspecting him of breaking into her home several times does indicate that she was, at the very least, somewhat afraid of Samanje. We also know that whatever type of relationship they had recently come to an end. And statistically, this is when a potentially violent partner would become more aggressive. When I was researching this case, I was honestly surprised that there really wasn't a whole lot of information about Samanje, especially since he was, at least at some point, arrested for murdering Aisha. I was also surprised to see that Aisha's family hasn't really spoken out about whether or not they suspect Samanje of being involved. If these rumors about Aisha's DNA being found in the trunk of a car that was tracked back to Samanje are true, and again, as far as I know, these are just rumors, I would think that that would warrant a little bit more suspicion about Samanje from Aisha's family, the public, and the media. Even though the charges against Samanje were dropped, he would eventually find himself behind bars. Not for anything related to Ieshia Jackson, but still for something extremely disturbing. In March of 2024, Samanje Dismuke was found guilty of second-degree sexual assault and sexual indecency with a child. Which, side note, the level of pedophilia involved in this case is extremely disturbing. Samanje would be sentenced to 5 years for this crime. Nearly 4 years have gone by since 22-year-old Ieshia Jackson was seen on Halloween night 2020. And with each passing day, week, month, and year since, her loved ones have not gotten any closer to finding out what happened to her. They have not been alone, though. About 2 years after Aisha's disappearance, a local woman who had attended high school with Aisha's mother, Laquita, started helping Laquita in advocating for her daughter. They have also received an overwhelming amount of support from the online community through the Bring Ieshia Jackson Home Facebook page. I encourage everyone to go over there and give the page a follow so that you can support Aisha's family and help bring awareness to her case. Captain Jared Prim with the El Dorado, Arkansas Police Department told KATV in 2023 that they are still working the case and have even reached out to the state police for assistance. But leads in Aisha's case have just gone dry. I find it really disheartening that after the Steve Wilkos Show, a lot of Aisha's case has been overshadowed by the drama that ensued after her disappearance. And I'm not just saying that to say that. It is very evident from Facebook and Reddit comments that a lot of people are just focused about what transpired on the show rather than the details of the case. And that is not Aisha's family's fault. I'm sure that they just went on the show to bring national attention to her case. But that was not the show's intention, and now because of them, that is what is left in the public's mind. So I ask that you please share this video and Aisha's case so we can bring back what's important to the limelight. And that is that a beautiful, vibrant 22-year-old woman is still missing. I know I ask you guys to share these cases all the time, but that is because a simple share can go a long way. It only takes 2 seconds, and if it reaches the right person, we might get answers as to what happened to Aisha sooner than we think. But until then, I will keep Ieshia Jackson's family in my thoughts and prayers, and hold out hope that one day she will be found. Ieshia Jackson disappeared from El Dorado, Arkansas sometime between October 31st and November 4th of 2020. At the time of her disappearance, Aisha was 22 years old and would today, in July of 2024, be 26. She was last seen wearing a white t-shirt with red dye splotches, a short black tutu skirt, and black pattern tights. Aisha stood 5 foot 2 inches tall and weighed about 115 pounds. She was last known to have long box braids, as well as piercings in her ears, navel, and ear cartilage. Aisha also had noticeable scars on her arms and knees, as well as several tattoos, including vines on her torso, a heart with doves and a ribbon on her chest, as well as several tattoos on her legs. There is currently a $10,000 reward for information in Aisha's case, being offered by the El Dorado Crime Stoppers and the Parents United Against Youth Violence organization. If you have any information regarding the disappearance of Ieshia Jackson, you are urged to contact the El Dorado, Arkansas Police Department at 870-881-4810. Thank you everyone for watching and hearing Aisha's case. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and make sure that you are subscribed so that way you do not miss out on any content. While you're at it, go ahead and follow the channel on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, where you can find case updates and information on how you can help out. I also highly encourage case suggestions, so please do not hesitate to hit me up on the socials, or you can email your suggestion to truecrimeguruchannel@gmail.com. Thank you everyone, and please stay safe.